Right, so good day, everybody. Welcome to another ESCoE webinar on economic measurement. This is the last webinar of this series, so please look out for further details in the autumn for the next series. Put that in your calendar. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Sanjeev Mahajan, and I work in economic statistics within the UK Office for National Statistics as the head of methods and research engagement. Separately, I'm also one of the 5 editors on the forthcoming 2025 SNA. So today's presentation is on the capitalisation rate of energy efficiency improvements in the housing market, a micro-level analysis for England and Wales by Miriam Steurer from the University of Graz. The presentation will last around 45 minutes. Points for clarification, please utilise the chat facility. If you have any questions as well, by all means do so. There will be an opportunity at the end for questions and answers too. This session will be recorded and the presentation will be placed, like all our other webinars, onto the ESCoE website. So a quick intro onto our guest speaker today. Miriam is a senior postdoc at the Institute of Economics at the University of Graz in Austria. Her main research focus is on real estate economics, with a particular emphasis on including machine learning methods into measurement problems. That itself is quite challenging, and you can imagine there's a huge amount of data being managed. In addition to her academic research, Miriam is currently engaged with Eurostat and IMF to help national statistical institutes and central banks to develop their statistics and improve their statistics covering real estate. The team that Miriam's worked with also matched energy performance certificates in the UK with the UK Her Majesty's Land Registry data, and they've created a micro-level data set for England and Wales on residential transaction prices and property characteristics, which forms the basis of the analysis. And there's a lot of work, I always say to people, in forming the foundation before you can move the step towards analysis. So thanks to Miriam in advance, and without any further ado, over to you, Miriam.
Thank you, Sanjeev. So when you read out the title, I realized we need a more catchy title. So please put suggestions in the chat. Thank you. So the first thing I want to mention, this is not me alone who's done this, but this is joint work with Robert Hill and Norbert Pfeiffer, both at the University of Graz. All right, we have a lot of stuff to go through. So basically, I'll start right away. So why do we do this, or what do we want to find out? And the big question we want to answer in our research is, does the housing market appreciate energy efficiency improvements, and by how much? In particular, what we want to know is, how does the private incentives to undertake energy efficiency improvements, how do they vary between property types, for example, between houses and flats and semis, and regions, and over time? And to this purpose, we match energy efficiency or energy performance certificates, so EPCs, with transaction data from the His Majesty Land Registry. And in this way, we create a micro-level data set for England and Wales on residential transactions that includes prices and property characteristics. So each EPC, we realize, contains not only the energy performance estimate of a particular property, but also a list of proposed energy improvements and their associated costs. And we'll use this information in our analysis. They also contain a list of characteristics which also help us to estimate a good model. To do all our analysis, we develop a hedonic model to predict the impact of implementing proposed improvements, so the energy efficiency improvements kind of suggested in the individual EPCs, and we look at how they affect price, the predicted price of each property. We had a couple of not setbacks, but kind of like issues along the way. And the biggest we found is plot sizes are missing in not only our data set, but generally it seems in England and Wales. Neither the EPC data nor the land registry data contain information on plot sizes. but everyone who owns a house knows that the size of the garden is a very important feature, and we really would like to have this in order to estimate a good model. The value of land can be a significant part of property's value, actually much larger than the structure in some urban areas that are kind of very in demand. And for anyone interested in this literature, look at Bostich et al. And the subsequent literature that follows the 2007 paper on this. So we realized early on that not taking the plot sizes into account leads us to underestimate the returns on energy efficiency improvement for detached houses in particular. So what we do is we construct a proxy match for plot sizes based on the average distance of a property to neighboring properties. And I'll go into this a bit later in more detail. So there's, of course, a lot of related literature. We are not doing this in a vacuum. There are early papers on energy efficiency certificates and their impact on prices in the 1980s, but these were quite small data sets. Then later on, for the Energy Star data started to emerge in the US. And since 2008-9, the EU and also the UK have kind of like demanded or kind of like required EPCs, so energy performance certificates, at the time of sale of residential properties, and this provided a lot of new data sources for researchers. I want to draw your attention particularly here on Fürst and et al. 2015 and Fürst et al. 2016, because they're looking at England and Wales, just like us, also looking at the similar or the same data sources, and ESCoE last year also for England. So the main focus of this literature is on estimating parameter values for energy efficiency labels. And we also do this, but we also want to go one step further and include the recommendations provided in the EPCs and their associated costs, and see whether they actually make sense in terms of monetary incentives for the individual person to do or household to kind of implement. All right, so a lot of this, actually the bulk of the work on this project is on data. So I want to discuss the data first. So in particular, we match the transaction data from His Majesty's Land Registry with the EPC data set. The transaction price data, the price paid data set, contains all property transactions in England and Wales, but has quite a limited number of characteristics. So each property is identified by its price, the address, property type, and the number of bedrooms. The Energy Performance Certificate dataset is published by the Department of Levelling Up Houses and Communities, and it has more detailed individual characteristics. It has the energy ratings based on the individual assessment. It has a lot of characteristics, as already said, but sadly not plot size, because basically not part of the property, I guess. I mean, not of the structure. It assesses the structure, and it contains individual recommendations for energy efficiency improvement, as well as their expected costs with their implementation, also the estimated energy efficiency level that the property would get after implementing these improvements. So we match these two data sets based on individual addresses, and we can match about 90% of the properties sold. There's some we can't match. Some of them are based because of exceptions from the EPC regulations. For example, properties that are in listed or historical buildings don't need to have EPCs done. Properties that are smaller than 50 square meters, properties that vacation properties, or properties that already have a building construction permit. So there are quite a few kind of like exemptions. Also, address discrepancies. I mean, we're all human, and errors exist, so we can't fully match every single property. And sometimes owners get EPCs without selling the property, and then we can't match, obviously, either. So once we've matched the data, we construct the sample for a Haldonic model. And the way we do this is we don't want the EPCs. So EPCs are valid for 10 years when you want to sell a property. So, but we don't want to have 10-year-old EPCs in our data set when we want to estimate the impact of energy improvements or energy ratings on prices. So we want them to be fairly new. So what we do is we limit the age of the EPC at the time of sale to 2 years. We've done this without this restriction as well. It doesn't really change the analysis or the results, but we thought it was cleaner. Also, if properties are sold multiple times with the same EPC, we only include the first transaction, also because that's the newest, that's the most fresh, the freshest, the closest to when the EPC is done. We also realized that the EPC provides recommendation and costs, but these costs haven't been improved for the last 10 years. So to make the whole exercise more realistic, we constructed a price index series based on 2 ONS data series, the RPI for housing repairs and maintenance charges index until 2014, and then the construction price index for housing repairs and maintenance from 2014 onwards, with which we inflate the prices stated in the individual EPCs. We have other data sources as well. So we use local authority districts as location of fixed effect. We use some census results as namely the supergroup and the index of multiple deprivation to provide some kind of socioeconomic kind of like flavor of for our analysis. We use the unique property reference number, the UPRN dataset, which provides geospatial location for basically all addressable properties in the UK. And then we do some data cleaning with Cook's distance. But again, the results are not really influenced by that. And in our paper, we show the results with and without data cleaning. Okay, first graph, I thought you deserve it. So, this is not our analysis yet. This is just looking at the data and what does the data tell us. First of all, the building construction year is really important for energy performance. The older properties behave or perform less well on energy efficiency than the newer properties. And the other thing we can see here is that for the older properties, we see that there's a large difference between the energy efficiency between kind of flats, which isn't too bad, and detached houses. And as we get into newer and newer samples, we see that this difference kind of like becomes smaller and smaller, with the newest buildings being not only overall more kind of energy efficient, but also the detached houses have held up with the flats and semi-detached. Okay, so the plot size proxy measure that we came up with takes us its idea that the distance, the plot size and the distance to your neighbors is inversely related. So if you're in a house and your neighbors are all kind of like within 2 meters from your property, you can't have a large garden. But if you're in a house and you can't even see your next neighbors on all sides, then you could have a large garden. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have a large garden, but you could have one. And so this idea we take into account. And what we do, we use the unique property reference number dataset, which is 40 million addresses, with all the locations of all addressable properties in the UK. So that's not just residential properties. That's government buildings, businesses, industry, any property that has an address, and with its exact geolocation. And we measure for each property that's in our transaction data set, in our residential transaction data set, we measure the average distance to the 10 closest neighbors then closest addressable neighbors, and we take this as an indicator of our plot size. We've played around with this variable a lot, and basically it doesn't really matter. As long as you take at least one distance, the distance to the next neighbor or two neighbors, or whether you take the fifth neighbor or the average of 10, it doesn't really matter, but the measure we get this way is highly significant, and it improves regression results. It also makes our results more believable. Yeah, I already said that. So just to give you a graphical illustration of what we are thinking about, look at here, we have property 1 with a lot of close neighbors and probably a smaller plot size. We have property 2 here with where the neighbors are further away, so it could have a larger plot size. And this is how it looks like when we plot these plot size indicators for detached houses all over the UK. It does generally, I think, present a reasonable picture. So we have a theoretical model for our analysis, but in the interest of time or saving time, I'll skip through most of this basically and just go to the model objective, which is that what we want to do is at the level of individual properties, estimate the change in property price associated with a change in the property's energy efficiency performance. So let's look at a particular property N, and this property N has energy efficiency label or performance E assessed in the EPC, and it also has in its EPC kind of like a potential energy efficiency E+, which it would get after implementing all the recommendations given in its EPC certificate. And what we do is we estimate, using our hedonic model, we estimate a price that the property would get in the market if it had its high energy efficiency performance kind of label, minus the original and the price it would get for its original energy efficiency performance label, and then compare this with the costs of getting this improved energy efficiency, which is given in the EPC, and which we then inflate to make it kind of like to bring it up to today's cost. We do this with a hedonic regression model, or many hedonic regression models. In particular, we look at 10 different ITL1 regions, 9 for England and 1 for Wales. And we look at property types, flats, semi-terraces, and detached houses. So we estimate 30 different models, and each of which looks similar to this. So what we have is we have the log price of the property. We regress this on the observed characteristics of the property, a time dummy, and the current energy estimate. And we have an error term here as well. The betas, it's the shadow prices on the kind of like the observed characteristics. Tau here is the time dummy coefficient, and the theta here is the estimate of the shadow price of the energy efficiency kind of performance. And what we do then is we use this model to estimate to predict the impact of energy efficiency improvements on property prices. So again, we use the information in the EPC, the current energy efficiency score, the recommended investments and their cost, and the potential energy efficiency score. We use this to predict 2 types of prices. So once we predict the prices based on the property characteristics. Let me go back for a moment. We use the hedonic model. Now we don't only look at the properties that are in our in our matched data set. We now look at the entirety of the EPC data set. Well, not exactly the entirety of the residential EPC data set. And independently of whether we could match the properties before or not, and we estimate two prices for each property. One, an estimated price for its based on its current energy efficiency performance rating, and a second price based on its potential energy efficiency ratings. And these two prices, we don't only do them at the time when they are sold or when they are not sold, but for each individual year in our data set. So, So we have P hat TN, model predicted sales price for property N in year T with its measured energy score, and P hat TN plus, the model predicted sales price of property N in year T if all the EPC recommended improvements were implemented. So, and each of these we do for each year. So this is just the formula of how we get from the hedonic regression model. And the idea is that households' private incentive to undertake the recommended energy efficiency improvements is the stronger, the higher the share of the costs that is covered by the expected price gain from the housing market. And this, we use this kind of idea to define the capitalization rate of energy efficiency improvement, or CREEI, as follows. So we have the differences in these two potential prices, or two estimated prices, the one with the higher energy performance and the one with the current actual performance. And we divide this by the costs of getting the energy improvements installed or happening. Times 100, but this doesn't really matter so much. Okay, so results. First of all, this is how a regression result in our model looks like. So you see here, this is the regression output for the hedonic model for flats. You see here, we have 10 different ITL regions. We have the Northeast, Northwest, and so on, and Wales. We see that each of these has a different estimated model with different estimated shadow prices. And here we see already the first differences in the kind of how much the market values energy efficiency improvements throughout the different regions. You see, for example, the energy efficiency shadow price for energy efficiency for the Northeast is 0.0044, which would imply that a 1 point increase in energy efficiency increases the house price by around 0.44%. And you see that for London, this is a bit lower, or quite a bit lower. So we just kind of like look at, if you look at this, if you look at this regression output, we see that all of the parameters or estimated parameters have the expected kind of directions, and they're all highly significant. Adjusted R-squares lie around 68 to 84. So it's kind of like most of the variation in the property market is explained by that. So this is just kind of giving you an overview of the kind of like the characteristics that we include, and kind of like there are a lot of variables in there, and we played around with some of the variables, but basically including more variables than we do here, it's not really improved the regression model anymore. So that's why we stuck with those. We do the same type of exercise for semi-terraces and detached houses. Again, the adjusted R-squares lie between 0.66 and 0.88. So we explain most of the variation in the market. All of the efficiency, all of the coefficients on energy efficiency are positive and significant at the 0.1% significance levels. for all models, but there's one exception, and that is London, for detached houses, when the proxy plot variable is not included. When the proxy plot variable is included, the regression result for, or the shadow price for energy efficiency for the detached houses in London also becomes positive, and overall the adjusted R-squared increase for this type of model. This is just giving you an overview of how the energy efficiency parameters or estimates look like if we don't include the size proxy variable. And you see here the the negative result for the London market, which actually is counterintuitive. It would mean that if you invest in energy efficiency in your detached house in London, then you're reducing the value of your house, which is not true in reality, but it means that we have an omitted variable bias here, which we can not completely remedy, but get a handle on when we include our proxy plot size. And you see that here this becomes positive. And the plot indicator variable, so a proxy plot indicator variable, is always highly significant and positive. Okay, so now to the results, and these are basically our results. So does it pay to improve, to do all the recommendations in your EPC? For flats, well, you have here for the Northeast, the average over the 8-year periods that we've looked at is 88, basically. So this is a capitalization rate of energy efficiency improvement of 88%, which means that for each 100%, 100 pounds that you of expenditure in your energy efficiency improvements, you'd get 88 pounds back if you sold your property after completing the renovations. In some years, you get in the Northeast, it is above 100. Recently, it was below 100. You see that in other markets, similar results. Basically, you see between 73 and basically 103 is the CREEI for flats. Look at semis and terraces, we find the first thing is that these are much lower numbers, which is partially a result of much higher or much more possible more significant improvements that you could do in in semis and terraces than in flats. For example, the most recommended investment is solar panels and solar heating and solar energy powers, and also there's much more intense energy, costly energy improvements recommended. So given that we only have an estimate of of all of the energy efficiency, the entire bundle and the costs, and we haven't yet split them up into individual components, we say, please look at each of the property types and compare the regions, but not across property types. For detached houses, we find that, again, there's quite a bit of variation between the regions. For example, the average capitalization rate of energy efficiency improvements in the Northeast is 88, whereas in London it's only 24. So that's a reflection of, first of all, our proxy variable is probably not quite exact enough to really get at the the London market, or not quite exact enough. And the other thing is that in London, size of a garden is just more important than energy efficiency improvements for many buyers. So sizes, kind of plot sizes of the premium, and the two properties, one of them being really energy efficient and the other not being energy efficient, but with a double garden. It's just kind of like, in London, the one with the less energy efficiency and the bigger garden probably wins out, or, Anyway, so we extended our model or our results to kind of like look at a specific group of properties, namely the ones that are below level C. We do this for two reasons. First of all, we realized that there are quite large regional differences in our results for the capitalization rates. And we also saw that there are large regional differences in the proportion of property below level C. And for example, here is the overview of properties below level C, the percentage of the market that are below level C. And you see that in the Northeast, detached houses, 46% are below level C. But when you look at London, actually 81% are below level C. So that surprised us quite a bit. That the London kind of like detached houses in London have a kind of very kind of poor quality in that sense. And you see that kind of like even for flats, we have different kind of like quite a few differences. And so we do this exactly the same kind of exercise again, but we do kind of like it's just for properties below level C, and then we compare the results. The finding is that nothing much changes except for detached houses. The capitalization rate for energy efficiency investments became a bit higher, quite a bit higher. But apart from this, the regional differences stayed kind of like the relative sizes of the regional differences stayed the same. So this is just a result of the capitalization rates of energy efficiency improvements for detached houses for the below level C group. And you see that especially in the Northeast, now they're always above 100. The London kind of rate didn't change much. It was 24 before, now it's 25.5. But kind of like you see they're a bit more spread out. So how good are our results? So it's really hard to kind of like get a handle on how good these results are, apart maybe from looking at the repeat sales sample. And that's what we do next. So we look at the sample of properties that were sold twice during the time that we kind of like in our data set. And each time they have done, each time with a new energy performance certificate. So we see that they improved these green sales. So they have, this is the energy performance during the first, or kind of like in their first EPC, and the red distribution here shows the distribution of the energy performance at the time of the second EPC. So each of these changed their energy performance between the sales, actually increased it. And so we look at what's kind of like their change in energy performance and what is the associated kind of price change. And then we compare this with our hedonic model and see how they compare. So, to do that, for each property N, what do? We look at the repeat sales sample. We compare the actual price of the property N at period T when it sold the first time, and T plus K when it sold the second time. And we compare this price change with the predicted price change from the hedonic model. Now, it's a new hedonic model, just estimated just on this sample of repeat sales. This is given by this here, again, between the time T and time T plus K. Then we take the ratio of these two estimates or price ratios, and we do this for each property in the repeat sample, and we take the geometric mean of this, and this gives us its variable k here. And both give us exactly the same result, then k should be 1. What we actually get is that k is around 0.9. So we think this is good. We think that 0.9 is very close to 1. That's the first thing. So we think this is a kind of indication that our hedonic model, which has an entirety of the EPC of the sales in it, is actually kind of like a good way of estimating kind of the capitalization rate of energy efficiency improvements. The second thing is, yeah, the repeat sales price changes are higher than the hedonic price changes. And that's actually what we expect, because what we expect is when people do kind of like energy improvements, that they might also do kind of like put a new color on, put new floors down. So it also improves the property in other visual ways as well, not just the energy improvements. So we think this is a good indication that our model is performing quite well. So this is the end of our kind of like results or research so far. We are kind of like, we've started with this data set. We find a lot of more questions can be answered with this data set. So what have we found so far? The energy efficiency improvements are not fully capitalized in the property prices. So this means kind of like the reduce carbon emissions and to really get people to invest in the kind of like energy efficiency of their homes. Governments may need to subsidize these energy improvements. And we see this is especially the case for detached houses. So far, we focused only on the case where all the recommendations in the EPCs are implemented, and the kind of like the rate of return for individual energy efficiency improvements will be higher than this average. Some of the recommendations is like to install a wind turbine, which may not be as energy efficient as kind of like putting an insulation around your boiler or changing the boiler. We also found that controlling for plot size is important, especially for detached houses in areas with high land prices. And we've proposed one way of kind of like getting a property variable, but kind of like more research on this can be done as well. There are substantial differences in the capitalization rates of energy efficiency improvements. So how much the market gives you back for your investments in energy efficiency when you sell the house, and also across property types. But we found these differences are not driven by the starting position in a particular property market. So it's not that the initial housing stock in one area kind of determines these differences. So it's really a different kind of a locational aspect. And last but not least, the hedonic and repeat sales models provide very similar results for the subset of the data we looked at, and we think this is a good indication of the overall quality. Thank you. So I just want to say two more things. If you have any questions, recommendations, complaints, please email Robert with the complaints, me and Norbert with the kind of like the positive stuff. This research was received funding from ESCoE. We are very grateful for that. And our special thanks go to Sanjeev, Sarah, and Chris for guiding us through this project. This was a year-long project, and they did it really well. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. I think the presentation was very good. I think you're very good on the transparency of the assumptions and the variations of the results. They come through very clearly. Obviously, you've mentioned my name, so I declare my interest for the audience. As part of the ONS ESCoE projects, I'm involved in them all, so there's guiding and steering, advising, and whatever you want to call it. So let's move on to, we have some questions. I was going to take chairman's prerogative, but I may well do so actually. Also, I'll go to the actual questions. In your work, you covered a lot of variations. Did you cover the difference between the age of stock, the housing stock? Because obviously some of the older houses may be made of stone and brick, and they'd have a different impact, versus some of the younger houses have prefab or breeze block or wood, etc. Whilst you consider that, I'll look at the questions that have come up.
Yeah, we did, and age is a very, very important variable. So yes, we did. We constructed age cohorts. I think it's 10 or 11 in total. We look at kind of like construction years, and we also kind of try to include additional information on the property, like kind of like whether they're double glazed or not, but basically, we found that age and the energy efficiency alone already gives us a kind of a very good indication of, kind of explains a lot of the variation. So age is crucial. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to move to the first question, but unluckily, Catherine Bevan, who's posed the question, is offline, but I'll quickly read it out. It refers to slide 13. Particularly in cities, a lot of older houses have been converted into flats. So we're obviously going to have more people in that accommodation, etc. Possibly the energy efficiency will be different for flats which have been converted from houses versus purpose-built flats. So they appreciated the fact that the plot wasn't from the analysis, but do you know what sort of impact that will occur?
Yes, basically, this is where the EPC dataset really gives us a lot of information. If I just go to the results, sorry for the hedonic results. Okay, if you look kind of here, most of the variables we included, and this is for the model for flats. We have here property type. In the category flat, we include flat and what they call maisonette as well. Here are the different age or construction age levels. And then we have here, we have built form level. So we have, is the entire property, the building, the structure, is it detached or semi-detached, or is it end terrace or mid terrace? So basically the house, flats that are in houses would be in this category, and the kind of like flats in longer stretched buildings would be either category in end terrace or mid terrace in that category. So the build from here refers to whether whether we have whether we have 4 flats in a house that used to be one big house, or whether it's a bigger block. And yes, we found this is important because it seems that in the older buildings, most of the insulation came from having a neighbor. So if you have neighbors on all sides, you're well insulated, whereas if you're completely standalone. So this is an important, variable.
Okay. It's always nice to have neighbours turn the heating on and you don't have to turn your own. So yeah. Exactly. So I'm going to ask Rachel Solovicic to see if we can unmute you to ask your question. Hi, Rachel. Hope all's well.
Yeah, this is a really interesting project. And this is a general thing about all home improvements. And when they talk about the cost of a project, are they including like the hassle of having people going through your house and like turning off your water? Because sometimes I wonder if the costs are fully measured.
Sorry, I had some acoustic problems. The cost of, I'm sorry?
Like there's the monetary cost of insulating your boiler, and then there's the hassle cost of somebody comes through your house at an inconvenient time, and maybe they turn off the water for a day.
Yes, I see what you mean. Well, it's only the monetary cost that we include here, obviously. And this is actually this is something that when talking to people working in this area, not exactly economists, but saying, you know, to get people to install better quality kind of, or invest in energy efficiency, it's good to get them before they move in, because that's the easiest time to do it. So that's kind of like in terms of preparing incentives, this is kind of maybe should be taken into account, because yeah, it's a big hassle to kind of retrofit once you're living there. Yeah.
So it sounds like the real issue is the cost is mismeasured. That, and this is true, I think, for a lot of capital investment in structures, because there's an opportunity cost, and maybe some of them it's bigger than others, and it would be interesting if you could somehow control for that.
Yes, I guess that would be, but I don't see how I could. So this is, with the data we have, I think, you know, actual monetary cost and seeing how much the market actually appreciates these things and whether it changes over time, whether it differs across regions, is basically what we're concentrating on here.
Yeah, thanks for that, Miriam. Thanks, Rachel. I think you're right. It's going to be a challenge to monetize such impact costs, but at the same time, I suppose, pick up the variation of people benefiting from this when they are the second or third purchaser down the line. So there's no such cost for them, they get the full benefit. So I'm going to move on now to Rui Evangelista. We're going to unmute you if you want to come on to the call.
Oh, okay. Yes. Thank you very much, Miriam, for this very interesting presentation. Actually, I wrote my question in the chat, but okay, I will formulate it. I mean, the impact of improvements has also been measured in some other studies, past studies, and for instance, for a part of the Swedish market, there's a study from 2013 that shows that more complex transformations or recommendations are usually attached to price discounts at sales, at the moment of sales. And I was just wondering, maybe I didn't understand this very well. When you model your hedonic regression, did you take into account the complexity of the improvements that were being proposed and on an individual basis? Because if I would say that perhaps if these are omitted, I mean the complexity, and if they are not taken into account in the regression, then when you try to estimate the returns on implementing these recommendations, these estimations that you make might be somehow, I don't know, over or underestimated. Maybe on an individual basis, this is the case. I don't know, maybe when you take them all together, I mean, for a region, maybe that's not a problem. But I would like you to comment on this. Thank you.
That's an interesting question. The way we've done it, we only included the energy efficiency score, the current energy efficiency score in the hedonic model. And everything else, like kind of like we didn't put in the model. And then we think we get a good handle on these kind of like biases in a way by doing this double imputation approach, by estimating, by using the hedonic model to estimate the price for the current energy efficiency level, and then for the potential energy efficiency level, we compare like with like, so to speak. So for example, in your case, if you have a very complicated layout, or and you have basically a property that underperforms on the observed characteristics, this could be kind of like, and you then compare it with some kind of like with some other estimate, you kind of like, you could kind of like bias, or kind of like you don't take the complexity of this one structure into account when you look at its kind of like potential. But if you kind of like use the hedonic model to estimate basically the kind of like the initial sales price as well as the later potential sales price, you kind of like you circumvent this problem a little bit. So the example is, for example, if you have a property that's maybe that's not with energy efficiency, but if you have a property that's located close to a very noisy road, but you don't have the noise of roads in your model, then you kind of like, if you use the model to estimate the price of your property, it's too high because you don't take the road into account. But if you use the model to estimate the kind of like the property both in the initial and in the later stage, it doesn't matter that you don't include the noisy road, because you never have the noisy road in either of the comparisons. Kind of like I'm not sure quite whether this made sense, but yeah, I think we kind of like we handle this with the double imputation approach.
Can I just come in with one comment on Rui's question, which is, I mean, one thing we could do is re-estimate hedonic model where we limit how big the increase in energy efficiency is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so or do it in ranges, like do it so where it's not the increase in energy efficiency is not greater than a certain amount, and then re-estimate another model where the range is within a certain amount, etc.
Okay. Thanks for that, Miriam. Thanks, Robert. So we're going to move to the next question. Hopefully this will be an easier and quicker one for you. Oscar Nicholson Greniger, do you want to come in and ask your question?
Hi, thanks for the presentation. It was really interesting. This might have been explained in the introduction, but what years does the data come from, and would you expect the same results if the study was repeated today when gas prices are much higher?
Yes, that's really interesting. We kind of like, it's 2000. We started 2012 to 2022. Here we just showed you 2014 to 2022 because the last two we haven't put in yet. It doesn't change anything. But 22 we only have half a year, and this is exactly kind of, so basically it would be interesting to see what has changed since the energy costs have increased, but we don't really have done so yet.
Thanks, Miriam. I think it's a good question, Oscar. I think time will tell, but there'll be, I think, a lot of other features of unusually cloud what's going on. Obviously, people's consumption of energy is going to be varying, etc., and whether they can afford it, etc. So you're going to get some very strange outliers, but it's a very good question. So moving on to the next person is Daniel Lewis. Do you want to come in? Hopefully we can unmute you.
Hi there. Thanks a lot for the presentation. I was just reflecting on your sort of gardens issue. One sort of data set that I've used in the past that might help you unlock that a bit is, again, the His Majesty's Land Registry Inspire Index polygons. So these are actual plots from transactions, I think primarily for freehold. So okay. it might only be a part of your data, but if you're already using the UPRN data to locate the houses themselves, then you might quite readily be able to look at something like the EPC reported floor size with the actual plot size through that spatial data that land use provide. But I'm happy to follow up if that would be useful, and it might get you a little bit further, but you've certainly got an interesting approach anyway.
Oh, we probably, yeah, that would be great. We couldn't find anything, so yeah, thanks. We'll look that up. Thank you.
Thanks for that steer, Daniel. I think I just want to check. Next question is from Dr. Arnaz Binsard, whether he's still online or not. Hopefully, if you're online. He's obviously got the luxury of 3 questions, so I would ask if you can be quick with those questions. And Miriam, obviously, brevity of the answers.
He's just dropped offline, actually.
Okay, right. So, Miriam, very quickly. First question, the property market can be affected by other factors outside the model, such as interest rates, taxes, etc. May the model be misspecified? May the structural models include a lag that's more realistic and robust than a single regression? That's the first question. Second one.
Should I just
Yeah.
answer?
Go ahead.
Yes, theoretically, yes. We found, however, that that our that the regression it doesn't perform much better when we do other things, and so we kept it simple, basically.
Okay. Second question, it's a very good and significant model. My worry is negative multi-collinearity between EPC and floor area deprivation level. Did you run partial least squares to remove the multi-collinearity?
Yeah, I see what he means there. Yeah, we should do that. Yeah, definitely. That's a good a good
suggestion
point.
for further work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, the hedonic assumptions may not be satisfied. Hedonic assumes price increases at a decreasing rate. In reality, it's not the case in terms of fluctuations sharply in metropolitan cities. I think that's more a statement than it's actually a question. Any thoughts, Miriam?
Yeah, we can in our we've looked at the functional forms and the kind of like the relationships between, particularly between energy efficiency and house prices, and we found that our log linear form actually kind of covers the variations quite well. So I think I think we're okay with that.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Lars Nizam to come in, but I noticed you've got 3 different questions. Could you group them together for the timeliness nature and allow Miriam to answer those, and then we can capture the others that are left.
My main question was about the EPC rating. So, and it's 2 parts to the question. One is, how did you convert the rating A, B, C, D, etc. to efficiency score 0 to 100? And second, those efficiency ratings, they also have associated with them an estimate of the annual energy costs. And so in addition to calculating the gain from the capitalization of cost investment, you calculate the capitalization of the net energy cost. And I'm wondering if you've looked into that.
The first thing is we didn't convert them. They provide the English and Welsh EPCs provide both the scales. I mean the points score and the band rating. So we didn't need to do anything. The second question, we've thought about this, but we found that this has been done before, and we wanted to be different. So we concentrated on the cost of investments, but it's an interesting point, because in equilibrium they should give the same result. We don't know whether they do in actual, but this would be we should look into those for future research.
Thanks, Miriam. Lars, do you want to ask your last question as well regarding Google Maps?
Yeah. So the previous question about using the spatial polygons probably makes this question not useful, but an alternative also would be to use Google Maps data or OS data or satellite data and merge it with your data to measure plot size. But that would be more work than if it's already done by the land registry. There's no need to do that.
Yeah, we have looked at that, but it's really hard to say who owns what when you kind of like look at from the top. We gave up pretty quickly on that.
Okay, thanks, Miriam. Yeah, there are some complicated, complex ownership chains for sure. Moving on to the penultimate, I know we've probably got hopefully Charlotte still on the call, but last written question, Vera Fritzers. I apologize for my pronunciation, but let me know what it is, what it should be. Are you still there, Vera?
Yes, I'm still there. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, it's Vera Freiters. It's a Dutch name. It's difficult, I think.
They're always very difficult.
Anyway, my question was, you're only taking into account the gain from selling a property, right? But could it also be that, for example, if people don't sell right away, they also have lower monthly costs for their gas? For example, that like in that way they would fully capitalize on their energy improvements?
Yeah, I think this is the similar question to the one Lars asked. Yes, basically there are 2 ways of getting at the benefits, I guess. And one is saying how much do you save in your energies consumption over X years, and how long do your investments take? And we thought kind of like an alternative way of asking this is how much does the market give you for that? And if the market is efficient, the two should be the same. Obviously, the market might not be well informed. It might not actually be. There might be trends and fashions that kind of distort the kind of like an efficient market reaction to this. But I think there's a lot of scope here to investigate the other side, the one you mentioned, kind of like the saving in energy, and compare the results of the two approaches. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the written questions. I think, although I can't see the hands up, is Rachel, have you got your hand up?
This is a different question. Are these energy improvements like real reductions in energy use, or are they keeping your heat from leaking to your neighbors? Because I would see there might be all these spillovers, good and bad. I'm wondering how that will affect the regression.
Well, I kind of like, I guess it's a mix of both in a way. Some kind of like, if you kind of double glazed windows, I guess, newer quality double glazed windows, they prevent your heat leaking out, but kind of like solar panels kind of provide you with kind of cheaper energy at the moment compared to the kind of like being on the grid. So it's a mix of both, I guess. But that wasn't, we took the kind of like, we took these directly from the EPC. So that's basically, they look at total energy consumption at the end. So how much do you need to keep warm?
Okay, thanks for that, Rachel. Yeah, it's interesting when you have wall insulation as well to sort of add into that. So if you're in a terrace and in the middle, then your heating consumption probably is a lot less. Right, that brings us to the end of all the questions. So just leaves me to say thank you very much, Miriam, for a very interesting and relevant and appropriate presentation there. And just to say to the audience, obviously this is as I mentioned earlier on, the last presentation webinar of this series, and then there will be another series in the autumn, so be on the lookout for that. And in between, just to sort of to say, there's the ESCoE conference in London, and if you're interested in coming, you can now register, so by all means. There's a lot of papers there, a lot of interesting topics, etc., and it's a very good learning opportunity as well as meeting people, and hopefully we may see you there. So on that note, I will bring this to a close. Thanks to Miriam, and have a good rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.